start the recording. Well, once again, go off and do a live demo and it's not restricted. What could possibly go wrong when you do a live demo with scripting? It's hard enough to get live demos to work at all. It must be the snow, right? It's a snow day.
I was so happy in the morning, it was snowing, and then it's gone. Like it's fucking...
You like snow?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't snow much, right? So I enjoy it for like when it does.
See, I've lived in places where it snows a lot. You know, where you can get like a meter of snow in a 24-hour period. And it's like, that's just a lot of shoveling and snow blowing. And it's okay living in the tropics of Canada. All right, so let's see. I have to figure out where the mouse is. There we go. It's there. And I'm going to talk about costs and economics. So did anybody watch any of the billing videos? I mean, I put the videos out, but nobody really watches them except me. Did I screw up the link? Oh, for God's sake. I had two different links. So, because I watched the video and I copied the link and I pasted it in. All right, I'll fix that. Hopefully the good one survived and not the... One was an AWS specific one and the other one was an IBM one. I like the IBM one better. It doesn't really matter which service you use. In the end, one of the most important things that you have to manage when you're dealing with the cloud is in fact costs. Now, I've kind of forced that on you because I say, hey, you have to stay under free tier. So I was like, I have something I want to deploy. I could do that as an example of how to stay under free tier, at least initially. Okay, so the video that I actually picked this time was about virtual machines. I mean, I've talked separately about serverless. I've talked about containers, but I haven't talked specifically about the pricing of containers. So when we talk about compute, not GPUs are in a different category, but they're a special kind of compute, and you can rent GPUs in GPU time, just like you can rent CPU time. About the cheapest that you can get in terms of compute is free. So, for example, Amazon has I think it's a nano instance that sits well in the free tier. When you start paying for them, you can actually get a decent amount of compute for a very cheap price. I used to use DigitalOcean or Linode are the two that I've used. So, you know, you grab a $5 a month instance and you've got something that it belongs to you. It has its own IP address. It has its own resources. Does it have a lot? No. It doesn't have a lot of resources, but it's not the machine sitting in your apartment, house, garage, tent, wherever you're living these days. So, why did you do that? Well, not the least of which is you probably don't want to be running a server from the UBC Wi-Fi. It's not horribly stable, and I'm not sure that you get the performance that you wanted. And you certainly would have to deal with the problem of how do I expose a server inside of an existing network to the outside world. There are ways of doing it. I'm not recommending them. This was one of the very first things that cloud providers delivered was, in fact, bare metal hardware. And then they turned it into virtual bare metal hardware. So it's not really physical hardware anymore. Now it's just a virtual machine. How many of you run virtual machines? One person. Let's see. Let me bring that up on my machine because I am sure there it is. Someday. It's got to add the snap-ins. So there. Oh, of course you can't see that. They can. Great. So pretty much all machines now, all hardware, have the ability to run virtual machines. This is my laptop, and I can run virtual machines on it. Why would I want to do that? Well, in my case, because I'm running Windows, and I want to run a Windows subsystem for Linux, I'm running inside of a virtual machine. That's literally how it's implemented. In addition, if I want to use Docker, the container package, on my laptop, it's going to run inside of a Windows subsystem for Linux virtual machine. So they are there. I haven't actually set up a separate virtual machine here, but it's pretty common. I actually routinely do that. I haven't set it up on this machine. I think I should. Say I could, because, I remember what I was trying to do. So the trick that I usually use is I actually have a second drive in there that has a Linux on it. And I like to put that inside of a virtual machine. And it didn't work right, and I wasn't quite sure why, so I didn't finish it. If you have a Mac, you can run virtual machines as well. Different piece of software. There's a couple of different packages that you can use. The Mac can actually also run x86 binaries in virtual machines, but that's done through a binary translation layer, which literally means that the CPU is emulating the x86 because he's got an M5 Mac sitting there, and it's quite capable of emulating old hardware. I mean, at this point, we now emulate old hardware in web browsers. So it's not like emulation is something new or surprising. It is something that we've been doing for a very long time. So let me come back over here and get rid of that. There we go. Now I just have to turn the recording back on so it can see whatever it is supposed to see. Great, okay. There we go. No, that's not right. Oh, that's even more interesting. It linked both of them. All right, so when you start using virtual machines in Azure or AWS or Google, what you'll find is that you can just simply use them on a reserved basis. That is a common way of doing it. It's the most expensive way of doing it. Now, expensive doesn't actually mean that it's going to cost a lot, but there is a cost with that. So what happened initially was people, like I said, they first started renting essentially co-hosting, where you had a piece of physical hardware that sat inside of somebody's data center, and you paid to keep that piece of physical hardware, which you owned, in their data center. And you can still do that. Most people don't do that anymore. Most people just simply want to be able to start running. The computers became sufficiently powerful. The whole point with the laptop, is that literally your laptop is now capable of doing things that only server class machines did a decade ago. The servers became more powerful. The standard server architecture these days is anywhere from 96 cores and up. I've seen as many as 240 cores, and I'm sure that there are more, because I haven't looked lately. Most people don't need 240 cores worth of capability or hardware support. What they mostly need is they need to be able to just run their little virtual machine on the cheap inside the data center. And what they do is they run what's called multi-tenancy, which means we're sharing. So you have a virtual machine, I have a virtual machine, and the beauty of it is they can give us something that says, well, we're going to give you a 4-core virtual machine. They're virtual cores. They're not physical cores. They're virtual cores. So you're sharing control or access to those cores with other people. In the old days, when people had telephone service that actually went to their homes, the actual capacity of the system to work, if everyone picked up their phone and turned it on at the same time, was 0. They do not guarantee that they have enough resources to satisfy everyone, because they know statistically most people aren't using the resources. So they can go and they can buy a really expensive high-end system and thus offer different people different tiering levels and have 500 customers on a single machine. And that changes their economics tremendously. As the machines became more commonly used, what ended up happening was people found that they had idle cycles. They weren't using them. And so first it became a third-party arbitrage service, and ultimately Amazon started doing it, and since then Azure and Google did the same thing, which is you have what are called pay-as-you-go, or spot. So Pago is literally, you start paying for it as soon as you create it, and you stop paying for it when you shut it down or when you delete it. Usually you can shut them down without running them, at which point all you're paying for is the storage cost. If you delete it, you're not paying for it at all. Spot instances mean I have a short-term job, I'm willing to buy somebody's idle time, and I will just simply use that idle time. Well, guess who has the big pool of idle time? It's in fact these cloud providers. So you can actually buy that. Spot and Pago are the cheapest models if you're trying to use a virtual machine. Why would you want to use a virtual machine instead of a container or a serverless function model? Go for it.
I think if you want to maintain like you want to maintain a connection with the server for like long periods of time, maybe.
The real reason is control. You get to define exactly what is installed on that machine. You decide that you really want to run Gentoo Linux on it, go build your own Gentoo kernel and run it there. You can put whatever you want in there. You can add whatever software you want on there. You can do pretty much anything because you actually control it as if it were your own machine, because by and large it is. Now, I'm being careful to hedge here because there are always certain restrictions as to what you can use the machines to do. I mean, if you set up a spam service, they'll shut you down very quickly. And one of the reasons you don't want to do a spam service inside of a data center on your own machine is because you're paying for egress. So you're paying to send things out. And that cost tends to discourage that. So mostly what now happens is that if people are sending large amounts of spam email, it's probably because their machine has itself been compromised, and they'll shut it down. Data transfer costs, which are the second thing on this list, are really the hidden killer. A lot of people don't really think about the fact that when you move the data out of the cloud, you pay to do that. If you're moving it between machines inside of their data center, normally there's no charge for that. They don't charge you to push data into the cloud. The golden handcuffs go on once your data is inside of that perimeter. Want to move it back out, you pay the fee. They don't do free tier because they like losing money. They do free tier for the same reason that a drug dealer gives you a free trial, which is you try it, you like it, you use a little more of it. Next thing you know, you're using a lot of it, and now you're paying the money. And that is, in essence, their model, their goal. Now, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. You want to build some sort of really cool cloud thing, and you say, okay, well, I'm going to use free tier, I'm going to get it started. That gives me the time and the ability to build it and make sure that it actually functions. So from that perspective, you can say that this is like a really cheap way for them to invest in venture capital. Anybody know what venture capital is? Anybody ever heard of a company called Flickr? Ever heard of a company called Slack? What do Flickr and Slack have in common?
Were they both the same company?
They were actually, more or less. So, and do you know where they were started? Yeah, in Vancouver. So, back in the early 2000s, so that would be within your lifetime barely, but in the early 2000s, some people actually wanted to build an MMORPG, and they were trying to figure out how to fund it. And so over a weekend, I kid you not, they literally put together a photo sharing site called Flickr. And they ended up selling the photo sharing site called Flickr to, I think it was Yahoo. And so, yeah, they made, I don't know, $80 million or $50 million or $70 million or whatever the number was. And then they took that money and they started building their MMORPG. And the MMORPG reached a point where it ran out of money as well. Venture capital is the group of people who come along and say, we will give you money to help fund your company. The reason I ask that is because I'm curious if any of you know what the venture capitalist's goal is in giving money to a startup company that will probably fail. How much do you think that they expect for a return?
Basically zero.
Sorry?
They basically expect individual companies to return zero,
So what do they need from their winner?
like 100x, 10x.
30x is usually the number, but yeah. 100x is nice. I actually know somebody who became a billionaire because he was an angel investor. He happens to be a UBC grad. And I think I've told this story probably before, but he was a UBC grad. So he graduated from UBC undergraduate. He went to Waterloo and did his PhD. He came back to UBC, he taught there for a while, then he went to Stanford and he taught there for a while when Larry Page and Sergey Brin showed up on his front porch pitching their idea for a new company that didn't exist yet. And he gave him $100,000. Anybody know who Larry Page and Sergey Brin are? No, it's even bigger than that. You're thinking of Larry Ellison. He's working. Alphabet, aka Google. So he invested $100,000 in Google, and that turned into billions of dollars, literally. So he was an investor, and those are the best kinds of returns you can get. Because I can tell you that $100,000 pre-existence Google turned into a lot of money. Those are the kinds of things that venture capitalists go for. So my point back is that, in essence, a free tier is their way of trying to create a customer base, even though they know most of them are going to fail. They only need to have one that turns into Netflix. You've heard of Netflix, right? No? No Netflix and chill for you? Yeah.
What kind of equity do VCs normally get for an investment like that? If someone comes with an idea, is it like more than 50%?
Actually, VCs don't like to invest at that level. You don't have enough incentive to succeed then. So a common approach there would be that the first round might be 15%. It depends on the VCs, but and they'll structure it in such a way that they'll have the right to buy more shares, so they'll be able to give you more money in exchange for more ownership. The most common dilution happens when you exit though, because at that point, someone is buying your company out. So you don't care, you're basically selling everything and you're moving on. In a typical acquisition, what actually happens is that you have to stay on for at least a finite period of time. A couple of years is very common. Someone I worked with for quite a number of years, they sold their company to Microsoft in 2006 for $250 million. So, I mean, he came up pretty well. And I had known them because I helped them build their product, and their product is still part of Windows. And it took Microsoft about a decade to get rid of the part that I built. It was stable, but they finally did manage to replace it. He did fine. I mean, I've done 2 startups, and I did okay on the first one, and I don't know, I made a small amount of money, a reasonable amount of money on the second one, which was about $250,000 in 1994. So I have no complaints. I mean, that company, the second one that went public, is actually a really good example because when they went public, the VCs only had like 3 or 4% of the total company. The longer you put off taking VC money, the more likely it is that you're going to exit with a good chunk of it. So it's easy to say, oh, we're going to take that money and run, but the first thing they're going to do is they're going to bind you to that company, and they're not going to want you to leave, and you're going to have someone who, to them, you are just one more company in their portfolio, and they're going to want to get you to exit so they can make money quickly.
If your company is not going to exit like publicly, aren't VCs incentivized? I mean, like they get priority in selling their shares, right? So like if the company is like not really profitable, it's not going to be like a winner. Aren't they incentivized for you to exit privately?
They don't really care. It's kind of odd, but their exit. So, all right. So the general numbers. The last time I looked, and it's been a while. I don't think it's changed dramatically. The general numbers are that for every 20 companies they invest in, 19 of them will not turn a profit, or the usual breakdown, as I recall, was 17 will either lose everything or be worth less than the investment. 2 of them will be worth at or slightly above the investment, and 1 of them will be worth 30x or more. And it just becomes the law of large numbers at that point. What they try to do is they try to pick companies that they think have the right combination of value proposition for the market and the team trying to build a product. I mean, if you're the shy, introverted, don't like to talk to people type, you're probably not going to get a lot of VC money. Because they want somebody who can actually go out there and sell their product and sell their company, convince other people that what they're building is the greatest thing since the paperclip. And we've all got paperclips. Most exits are private exits at this point. Slack was a private exit. It was a very profitable private exit. Salesforce purchased Slack. Slack came out of the second MMORPG that they tried to build from Flickr, so they took the money. They ran out of money, but they had this really cool way of working with each other they built internally, and they turned that into a company they could then turn around and sell to Salesforce. And I have a friend who works at Salesforce. Oh, I'm sorry, Slack. He works for the Slack part of Salesforce, which is still kind of carved out as a separate entity. You can make a lot of money doing startup companies, but they're long shots. But then again, you can also sit down and you can build a brand new agentic tooling mechanism that runs automatically and has no security and get $1 billion for it. So it really is very much a crapshoot. I mean, if you don't know what I'm talking about, then I'm talking about OpenClaw. The OpenClaw developer who started that last November, apparently is a dating thing. I was reading about this. It was like trying to get an automated bot to like go to dating sites and automate that for him, and he turned it into literally an AI assistant. That became ClaudeBot, MoldBot, OpenClaw. And then, what, 3 weeks ago, OpenAI paid him $1 billion. $1 billion. Now, he's working for OpenAI, and he probably has to work for OpenAI for a couple of years, but how many of you would be willing to work for OpenAI for a couple of years for $1 billion? There we go. At least people are honest. It's like $1 billion is a lot of money. I mean, even if you really like buying cars, $1 billion goes away. You have to start buying really big things like yachts, really big yachts, and planes to be able to burn that kind of money. And then you get to Elon level, and it's $600 billion. You know, like, what do you spend it on? At any rate, back to free tier. Free tier is their ticket to helping you build something that's going to push that up. And I asked about Netflix for a reason, and the reason I asked about Netflix is because when I first started using Netflix, it was a DVD by mail business. They literally sent you a DVD, and you played it, and then you put it in an envelope and you send it back to them. And every month you paid them a fee, which pretty much means that they didn't ever care about the discs. The discs were essentially disposable for them. And in the 1990s, it was pretty obvious to me. I mean, I remember talking to Blockbuster Video, which no longer exists, about the idea of streaming movies to people at home. And they built the tech and whatnot, but the problem was it didn't fit with their business model, and they couldn't see beyond that. Netflix, on the other hand, said, our business is to get movies into people's homes so they can watch them. And so they invested in the tech. But they didn't want to build out the infrastructure for doing that, so what they ended up doing was working with Amazon. And Netflix was, probably still is, but I haven't confirmed that recently, the largest single customer for Amazon. I mean, the numbers for Netflix are astonishing when you look at it. It's like, I don't know, 15 or 20% of the total network traffic on the global internet is Netflix. A lot of money in streaming video to people. And over time, they've built a very sophisticated service where the videos are cached so that what you're watching is probably on an intermediate server close to you. That's the whole idea behind things like Akamai or CloudFront. Cloudflare, CloudFront, Akamai, there's several of these. They all do the same thing, which is they move commonly used content closer to the customer. And they keep those movies at differing quality levels so that if the network bandwidth starts to go to shit, they'll switch to a lower quality level to make sure they keep streaming that movie to you at a rate that allows them to keep showing it to you with minimal degradation. Maybe you've seen that before, where you can see the quality shift over time. And that's all dynamically done. And they started that on a very small basis, and they built it up. And they're not the only ones who've done that. There are lots and lots of these cloud service providers who started all the way down here at free tier and built up. But free tier isn't really free once you go over the threshold. That's when it starts to cost you money. So you always have to be careful. When you're trying to stay under free tier, you want to do that until you have the revenue to pay the bill. But that's when that trade-off starts to come into play. So it's like I always say, and it's worked out well for this class, stay under free tier unless you have a monetization model that would justify you going over free tier. So if you can do it in keeping it under free tier as long as possible, you actually have the ability to start generating revenue before you begin to incur expense. And that's what's going to make those VCs look at your books and go, you've got a business here. Because you have something that people want. You clearly understand how to do the trade-offs between building a product and making sure that it is a sustainable business. And that's all the VCs care about, right? I mean, the VCs don't do this because they like, well, they do like the gaming aspect of it, the investing in something that's going to be successful, but their ultimate goal is to make themselves even wealthier. How many of you have ever heard of Stanford University? So, if you drive out from Stanford and you drive up into the hills, not very far, behind the Stanford shopping center, which isn't technically part of Stanford, but the land belongs to Stanford, you drive up along this stretch of road called Sand Hill Road. And Sand Hill Road is basically where probably 35 or 40% of the world's venture capitalists work from. It used to be a higher percentage, but they've kind of spread out over time. And they literally represent probably more than $1 trillion worth of investment ability there. And that's where people go. That's where they go and hang out, they talk to these people, and their concern is $1 trillion is not enough. They need more. I think that's when the game starts to become more important than their reward. Just the winning. When you start spending money, understanding where your costs are going is super important. That's part of observability, but this is a very specific kind of observability. It relates to cost management. And when I start doing experiments with LLMs across APIs, the first thing I do is I always ask Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT or whoever's doing it, make sure you label them so I know what I'm spending those things on. Because I want to know what is the actual cost of me providing this thing. And the mouse has moved, so therefore. There we go. All right. And this is kind of the point that I always like is when you build your little side project, it starts out you're getting 100 requests a day. That's certainly well within the free tier, and then it spikes because you get TikTok, or you get Y Combinator, or you get Slashdot, or there's always something out there that will suddenly cause you to trend. You know, Elon mentions you on X. And now you're getting 50,000 requests an hour. Well, good for you. You put it onto AWS and you set it up so that it would all scale. So you got auto scaling set up and it just auto scales. And then it starts hitting your credit card. Because you haven't spent anything with them before. It turns out they're not willing to wait until you owe them $100,000. So then you see that $500 charge come through. I mean, I don't know how many of you actually have your own credit card versus using a parent's card. It's better if it's a parent's card. Then you can explain to them why you got a $2,000 charge from Amazon Web Services on there. This actually happened to me, where Gemini went into an overnight loop, never exited, and just kept doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I had a $500 budget set on an account. It doesn't stop at $500 with Google. What happened was they sent me an email at 11:30 at night. Oh, you went over your $500 budget. And then I woke up the next morning and there was a $500 charge, and then there was another $2,000 charge, and then I think by the time it was done, it was another $1,100 or $1,400, all for a loop overnight that didn't do anything. It literally was just a bug in their coding engine. I'm very careful about that now. So, free tier normally means you get free tier for a year. Then you have to start paying for it. The usage caps there do reset monthly. They don't roll over or anything like that. there aren't any services that are included in that. And if you start sending any data out, you're going to have to pay for it because egress costs is where they always hit you. Yeah.
So for your example, didn't you have rate limiting set up? And if you did,
Yeah, and it didn't do it. It doesn't actually stop. Google's rate limiting is completely advisory. It sent me an email.
so wouldn't you say your enforcement point wasn't really an enforcement point?
Well, this is also the AI side of things, and frankly, it's not very well set up. I mean, on the other hand, when I use Anthropic, there's a hard ceiling. The others all have hard ceilings. Google didn't have a hard ceiling. So my mistake was in thinking that my maximum liability was $500, not $3,400 or whatever it ended up being.
Because it doesn't that qualify as fraudulent or like misadvertising?
Well, you know the best part was? After that, I started getting these emails from the Google AI salespeople going, we'd love to talk to you about your AI usage. Nope. So, that probably is, well, I don't know. It is what it is. So, the way that you end up building things is pricing aware, cost aware. Moving data out is expensive, so they want you to keep the data in the cloud. Now, what does that also do? It means that you've become captive. And that's one of the most important things. How many of you watch YouTube? It'll just autoplay, right? It just keeps picking the next video. Why?
I think it has to do with the fact that whenever a new video starts, you can play an ad, and they won't ad money. But also because brain rot.
If you don't have any, but if you have, let's say you pay for no ads, they still do it. They still play the next video. Why?
Engagement.
Yeah, that's always the thing. So this is the point that I keep coming back to over and over again, is that the very cost model of the cloud ends up driving both your architecture, but then it also ends up driving you to monetize in a way that further boosts their business, which is kind of an interesting sort of thing. So not only do we get you using the drugs, then we get you to get your friends to use the drugs, and you have to buy more drugs from the supplier. I'm being slightly facetious here. Clearly these are just computational resources. Cross-region is expensive, so people tend to stay in one region. Spot is cheap. You can design for interruption. Reserve is cheaper, so if you know that you're going to be doing this for a year, you can just reserve for a one-year term, and you're going to get a cheaper price on it. Each of those things is built to improve engagement and to lock you into the vendor. Now, YouTube's choice in videos is fine, except I keep getting the same video over and over again. How many times do I have to have the video about Markov models? Okay, you can tell my YouTube video viewing is pretty weird. Because I bet you've never seen the Markov model video.
You know about Markov, like chain and all that, like.
Well, this is actually between the two mathematicians who were arguing. They were Russians, right, during the Russian Revolution, and one of them was this very devout religious dude, and the other one was this very non-religious
I think I've seen this something similar. They're like very ideologically opposed to one another.
Yeah, and they fought about this, and basically that's how. So Markov didn't like the other guy, and so the other guy made some position. Markov said you're wrong, and then he built this whole model to prove that he was wrong by building a predictive engine. And yeah, so maybe you have gotten into that video. Okay, well, so we're both weird. Fine. All right, so what does the CCT for this look like? Monthly costs stay under. Make sure you have a budget one and an auto shutdown. The auto shutdown might be extreme. Maybe you want to have a tier here. So if you don't want to go over 50, so have it warn you when you're over 25, and then have it warn you when you're at 40, and maybe have it warn you at 45, so you have an option before just that final auto shutdown. And then how do you test it? Well, you just generate some load, right? That's not very hard. Do things that would cause you to go over that tier and see if it fails. Make sure you get those emails. Make sure you get those warnings, and make sure that when you finally do go over that, it stops and you get a red bar test that says your system is down because you've gone over your budget. Perfectly reasonable. Recently, there was a company that disclosed that they had been working from financial data that was not correct. Anybody hear about this one? Why was their financial data not correct? Take a guess.
They were using AI.
It's Claude, actually. I think it was Claude. Yes, and the numbers that it was giving looked reasonable to them, but they were positive, they were good. Not sure. And the AI gave it to them. So this goes back to how would you dealt with that particular case? How would you build a red bar test for data that you're getting from an AI to know that it's actually representative of reality rather than just something that it created to make you happy? You should be happy. These numbers are what you want to see, right? I mean, honestly, part of what makes me suspicious is when I get too many positive results from Claude and I'm like going, yeah, I don't believe this. When things go wrong, I actually feel better because then I feel like they're real. And that might sound a little strange, but if I'm running an experiment, and I use Claude to do experimental loops, and they're all working a little too well, I'm like, I don't think this is working so well. And then when something goes wrong, I'm like, oh, okay. And then you dig into it, you figure out what's wrong, you fix it, you go move forward. And that actually has worked pretty well. In the case of the AI-generated stuff, I actually also use, you'll like this, I use other AI to look and check and see. Turns out it works. So you can literally say, go check and make sure that the data matches the results. I do that for papers. So I just spin up a little AI instance, really cheap ones. They do a really good job of this, it turns out. They're not very tuned for making you happy. They're just tuned for doing their jobs. And so they go in, they look, they say, the data doesn't match, the data does match, and they give you the evidence of the data matching or not matching, so they'll explain what they found that matched, and then you're done. And so that's not an unreasonable way to build a CCT either. This is why I said it's going to be short, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing. I've done that a couple of times in Class Studio. So this is the point at which I'm going to ask. It's more than 11 days. Yeah, I was going to say it's more than 11 days. It should be 2 weeks from Friday.
It's 28.
And Friday is the 14th, so that would be 2 weeks.
It's 20 minutes.
Yeah. Today's the 10th. I think it's Saturday. Today's the 10th. The 17th, the 24th, 25th.
You made it.
It is Saturday, I think.
Oh, how interesting. How odd of me. Okay, maybe it's because I did the Friday on the other one. So that means that we're 17 days, 19 days. Alright, fine. How many people have started the capstone? That's better than before, so we're making progress. How many people are worried about the capstone? Why? What are you worried about?
I'm afraid, because like, I have a bunch of CCTs, and I'm afraid I might not be able to read all of them in time, and then I might have to revamp what I have initially, and then what I'll...
You do realize you don't have to implement everything, right?
I know.
You can have a CCT that fails for a feature that you want to implement, and that's perfectly legitimate. It actually is the right discipline. It says, here's what I wanted to accomplish, here's what I was able to accomplish within this sprint, and see the CCTs that show that I didn't accomplish that are still there. That's perfectly fine because it's honest. That's the big thing for me is if you give me code and say, oh yeah, I did all of this work, and then I start looking and going, Those are empty tests that don't actually do anything, and you're claiming something about them, and you're like, I don't think so. I mean, if you only had red bar tests and you could do anything, that would be a different matter. But if you have red bar tests and some of them are passing and some of them are failing, I'll say, okay, at least I understand, and if the rest of the documentation stands up and explains to me why, then that's fine. Then I'm not going to bust you because your code is, you were over ambitious and tried to build a project that was larger than the time available to you. Learning is figuring out what's working, what isn't working, and why it's not working, and how you're going to get to where you want to be. And that's not a requirement that you do that. Remember, after the code, and I think the code is the hardest way to demonstrate what you learned, honestly. Partially because you can all sit down. How many of you have vibe coded any part of your capstone? Right, there we go. I have no problems with that. That's my expectation. But on the flip side, you understand why I can't give much probative value to the code itself. The code is a manifestation of your design. If the code is crappy, that's probably not a good ringing endorsement of your design. If the code is good quality and it matches the design, then I'm going to be a lot more impressed, because that suggests to me that you've learned the right skill set, which is nobody cares about your code anymore. What they care about is your ability to walk in and solve problems for people, to take a problem and say, this is what I see, this is what I think will fix it, and let's build a prototype for that. And one of the strengths of having the AI is you literally can prototype things and throw it away when you figure out it's wrong. Fix the design and do it again. Any ambiguity in your specification could lead to the AI coder doing the right thing, or the AI coder turning in a piece of shit because it found a way to drive a truck through the hole that you left in your spec. Well, if there's a hole in your spec and you see that I don't know, Claude, because that's what I've been using most of lately, my AI coder drove a truck through that hole, I can go fix the design and throw the code away and do it again. Question?
Two questions. The first one is the code base includes all the documentation that supports your learning. So
You get to do a design reflection, right? Afterwards.
I meant like all like the
Yeah,
logs and
right,
all that.
yes, but that's exactly what that's all about.
Okay. And
Yes.
then the second question is
You don't get to change the code after the code freeze.
but can you change the documents?
No,
The second question is
that's part of your code.
assuming that like let's just say you bytecoded the whole thing. Your project still aligned with the proposal. Can you go back and rewrite all the CCTs to match what is implemented in code?
You can, but why?
Let's
I mean, the CCT is testing things that are no longer part of the design?
potentially.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, CCTs aren't a guarantee that this is what I'm going to end up building. That's, if you write software, it can be a moving target.
I guess maybe to reframe the question, can you rewrite a design from the artifacts, code artifacts?
Okay, so the design document you submitted you can't rewrite, but you can change what the code is now, and you can reflect that in the documentation that's in your code. If I can't understand that, then I'm probably going to mark you down, and you can make the decision on whether or not you want to write that design reflection. The design reflection is not an opportunity to change the code. The code is frozen. The design document, the design reflection is to say, this is what I produced, this is what I wanted to produce, this is the reason there's a distance between these things, and here's how I would change it or do it differently. That's why it's a reflection. Every software project you build through the rest of your career is going to be something other than what you set out to build. And being able to reflect on that and say, what did I do wrong and what would I do better next time is really the deepest learning that I could ask of you. Because that's going to mean that when you walk out the door into the rest of the world and you start building shitty software for people, you have a chance of making it better over time. So it'll be less shitty.
I guess maybe I'm stating the problem incorrectly, but if we were to recurring it again, what I'm essentially asking is for just this code freeze deliverable, if for some reason we wanted to swap projects entirely, and then like we started with the full vibe coded product, and then worked backwards to produce all the supporting documentation.
You're not, so the design that you wrote before doesn't have to reflect what you ended up delivering. I'm not going to go back and look at your original design and say, does this match that original design? Because I didn't expect it would. It's a little dicey to take the idea that, hey, I'm going to change at the last moment, but if you can pull that off, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. If I have questions about that, then we go through, I'll either talk to you about it, or you'll get some horrible grade back on the code, and you'll be going, oh shit. And you can write an actual document that explains what you actually built and why it fell short of what you thought it should have done, and how would you do it differently next time. Or you can just ask Gemini to vibe that up too. That was harder. I mean, they'll give you really good feedback, but I suspect that it'll be harder for them to write the kind of reflection I would expect from the person that wrote it. It's sort of like the difference between an autobiography and a biography. You lived it, they didn't live it. They can look at the artifacts and they can give you criticisms and feedback on it, but you're the one who made the journey. Does any of that make sense? I know it's kind of a weird way of looking at it, right? Most of the projects you probably have been doing over time have been just build this thing that we told you what to build and have a nice day. And what I'm hoping to give you is a skill set that is more durable than that, but probably won't really mature for another 5 years, which is going back and looking at what you did and thinking about how you would do it differently. Because that's the only way you're going to end up learning. And I know you think that you're at the end of the learning stages, but in fact, once you move out of university, you have to deal with the real world where the learning doesn't stop. Well, I mean, unless you sit in your parents' basement playing video games for the rest of your life, in which case maybe it does. Or you sell your startup company for $1 billion and you work for 2 years and then you go, I'm out of here, and then you just go live on a beach someplace. But those are fine life choices. They're just not what I suspect most people are going to end up doing. So, evidence. What proof do you have that things work? Screenshots of deployments, do you have them? Test outputs, log showing behavior, cost reports. All of those things help build that story. But let's say you haven't got to a point where you got any of this stuff. You're going to be sitting here going, oh shit, what am I going to do? You're in panic mode. The answer is, tell me what you have. Tell me what you don't have and explain the gap. Because at a minimum, that means you're doing the reflection that I'm asking you about already. You're saying, you didn't get as much done as I wanted to because the dog ate my homework. It snowed on Tuesday a little bit, and I was traumatized by it. I don't know, whatever the reason is. And I'm making up bad excuses because probably the reality is I really had to play this brand new video game that just came out, and it was more interesting than doing the capstone. So if you have, well, you will have CCTs. For your CCTs, if you have code that implements them, point to it. If you have a test that verifies the claim, point to it. This is kind of the whole point of a CCT. Not listing a long laundry list of things that you'd like to do at some point. It's, these are the things that I wanted my project to be able to do and claim. I did these. And if you have CCTs that you don't actually implement, don't put them in there. Or mark them and say, look, this was aspirational. I wanted to do this. This was part of the design. It didn't make it, and here's why. Again, that's fine. I mean, I'm going to be a little flippant here, but if you give me just a long list of CCTs and you say, I implemented one and I didn't have time to implement the rest of them, I'm probably not going to be convinced that you quite met the bar. You probably won't get the grade that you deserve. That's nice and ambiguous. Doesn't mean anything, does it? That's very important when you talk to people. Say things that sound very definitive that don't actually mean anything. I'm joking. I'm going to do something interesting on Thursday that I haven't decided yet. I'm not going to commit to, but I think I know what I'm going to do. Yeah?
First, I have a question. For the evidence checklist for each CCT claim, now, I have an idea as to how I can argue, hey, I have enforced this. There's literally no other way I could have done this.
Okay.
But then you could say, but there was definitely something else you could have done. So how do you definitively know that, yes, you have indeed enforced the thing?
Okay. I'm not keeping a super high bar here, right? I'm not going to sit here and say, you know, you could have done this in addition to what you already did. I might give you feedback and say, you know, something you might want to think about next time is. But what I don't want to see, so I didn't see a whole lot of in-betweens the last time I did this class. What I saw were people who had long lists of CCTs, which then led to tests that were no-ops. That is not a legitimate claim. Those are the ones that pissed me off, because it was somebody saying, yes, I implemented all these controls, and they weren't implemented. Yeah.
You just choose to like have a minimal set of CCTs then? Like I think the minimum was 3, and then just do those 2. Would you lose much to that? Or? Compared to like being more ambitious and kind of distracted.
It would leave me questioning what you designed. That's the problem, right? I would be sitting there going, what is it that you actually built in? You built the thing that was 3 CCTs was all it took to test the whole thing. It's like, so was this a 30-minute vibe code?
No figure
No tinker. Exactly. So I took Notebook LM and added a voice monitoring system to it, but it didn't work.
Like basically the list of the CCTs needs to be enough that like you kind of understand what the whole app does.
Right. I mean, the CCTs are the things that you claim that your app is doing, modulo the things you didn't get time to do. If you get time, and this is the whole point, if you get time to do all of them, then it makes my life really easy, because then I don't have to actually spend a lot of time. I see the thing, I look at it, I go, oh, this is great. Why do I not care about the language? Why do I not care about the deployment? Because I'm not going to go and deploy it by this project. If you really want to fake it to the point where you give me screenshots that show this thing running, or videos of me, of you know, the things that are going on, good. You've learned how to use Nano Banana better than me. Have you seen Claudius on YouTube? Claudius is basically, it's based on Claude, the Anthropic tool. And it's this little animated thing, and it's all done. I mean, he does these, whoever's putting these together, the guy who does it, has a whole pipeline, and he literally can turn these things out like 2 days after something happens. He puts them on YouTube, and they're great. And I'm like trying to figure out how I could get that, because that pipeline is so awesome. It literally creates like a 30-minute animated video. And I'm just like, wow. See, if you do that, I would be super impressed. You don't have to even do the code or the reflection report. You just submit the video and say, this is what I built. And I'd be like going, damn, this is good. I had one of those last term. One. There was one that was really big. It kind of blew me away. The rest of the videos are talking head videos. And talking head videos are okay, but they're kind of boring. You know what a talking head video is, right? That's a student doing a voiceover on slides. Usually without a picture, so it's not even a talking head, it's just a talking video. But, alright. So, does that address your question? He's trying to navigate the thinnest route through this to get it done. And that's fine. Who's going to give me the Claudius set? You can give me the Claudius set?
That's something very similar.
Cool. Now I'm excited. Now he set the bar really high. Great, because, I guess the downside of the way that I do this is that I don't get to look at all of the artifacts and then like set the bar and break downward from that kind of neat. One person like knocking it out of the ballpark, as they say, would make it hard for everybody else. I'm not going to do that. I don't really care about that. All right, so like I said, I didn't have a huge amount to talk about today, and I managed to ramble it into an hour. Does anybody have any questions? I'm happy to answer questions. How many people are happy with their capstone project right now? There you go. So it's either going to be him or them. They're going to be setting the bars for you guys. So just so you know, my advice is just take them out early. How many people aren't using AI? Did anybody notice that Claude was actually used to for targeting in Iran? What was it? Do you remember? In U.S. strikes in Iran, one of the things they did was actually use Claude, an instance of Claude, to build all of the targeting information. And the final of this was 1,000 targets. And the person, now this is part of the whole debate with Anthropic right now, is that Anthropic doesn't want Claude used in anything that could kill people without a human in the loop. So that report of 1,000 different targets, which included one target that was near a girls' school, was presented to a human who had, I think, 6 hours or something. It was a very short period of time to go through and approve it. And I will mention this because this is definitely applicable to the things we talk about in this course. A lot of the things that we look at, we say, the kinds of apps you're building aren't the kinds of things that are going to be killing people. But in this particular case, I think that there's an important lesson to take away from it, and that is that AI is very powerful, but it also has absolutely no inherent moral compass. It has no moral judgment. That doesn't mean that it couldn't, but it certainly isn't trained to do that. If you give a human 1,000 targets to vet in 6 hours, what you're really doing is just simply turning the human into a rubber stamp. And it kind of makes the whole idea that there's a human in the loop a farce. And that is one of the greatest risks that I actually see when using AI at the present time, is it's the exact same mistake that people use when they ask ChatGPT a question and they just copy-paste it into an answer block. Yeah, it was the human who ended up doing that, but they didn't look at the output. They didn't engage with that output. I hope you're not in a position where that will be an issue, but I can guarantee that someone in this room will probably be faced with those kinds of issues as they get into the real world. And they won't necessarily be that level of life or death obvious. There's 160 children who died from one target. One target. And it's not like they can even argue that it was. The problem is it was near a legitimate military target. And there's no guarantees in those kinds of systems or situations. And that is all in the cloud. Cloud lives in the cloud. All of the AI are built inside of data centers. So, I'm looking forward to the Claudius stack. I haven't seen Claudius talk about that one yet, though. I had an interesting conversation with Claude about it. Very interesting. But the point is that they're not trained. So you grow up around people. You learn what social norms are. They're not trained in social norms. They're trained by making them read books. Imagine if all they ever did was read in a room and like shove more books on the door and just say keep reading. Books and pizza. That's all you need, right? So don't use the AI, but don't forget that AI is not a panacea, and it doesn't have the same social understanding that you do, because you spent 20 plus years learning that. Yeah, enough of that soapbox. I'll see you on Thursday. I suppose I should actually offer people the opportunity to demo their capstone projects. That'd be nice.
So if we do that, the class is
Well, I just thought of the idea now, but yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be a requirement. It'd be more like an optional thing. If you actually want, you can present it, and then that would be it. You know, we'll let the class vote on it. I just put him in a panic. He's like, oh my God, I can't do that. So, all right. I'll see you on Thursday. I'll see what I can do that's tricky.